My fiancé's perfect family offered to pay for our dream wedding. The check came with a single, handwritten condition that made me call the whole thing off. The envelope was thick, creamy, and smelled of money. Real money. Not the crisp but ordinary scent of a new bill from an ATM, but the subtle, intoxicating aroma of expensive, cotton-blend stationery that had been stored in the drawer of a mahogany desk, nestled beside dried lavender and old, important documents. It felt heavy in my hands, a tangible weight of expectation, generational wealth, and unspoken obligations. Our names, Mr. Lucas van der Linde and Ms. Chloe Reed, were inscribed on its face in the elegant, looping cursive I'd come to recognize instantly, my future mother-in-law's handwriting. Each swirl of the ink felt like a tiny, perfect cage. Lucas, my fiancé, watched me from our second-hand sofa, his face lit with a boyish, triumphant grin. His eyes, usually so warm and familiar, were bright with uncomplicated excitement. "Go on, open it. I told you they'd come through. I told you, Chloe. This is it." We were sitting on the floor of our cramped one-bedroom apartment, a space we'd painted ourselves in a burst of optimistic yellow that now seemed to mock us. We were surrounded by the chaotic evidence of our dreams outrunning our means, spreadsheets with columns of terrifying red numbers, glossy wedding magazines splayed open to pages showcasing dresses I could never afford, and a half-empty pot of cold coffee. The numbers weren't just not adding up, they were screaming at us, a relentless chorus of financial impossibility. My career as a freelance graphic designer and his as a dedicated but underpaid high school teacher didn't exactly scream lavish vineyard wedding, which is what his family had subtly, and then not so subtly, insisted was the only appropriate venue for a van der Linde. My own family, warm and wonderful and solidly middle class, had already contributed what they could, a generous, heartwarming check that covered our chosen photographer and the flowers. The rest was a mounting mountain of debt we were already terrified to begin climbing. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm my racing heart, I slid my finger under the pristine flap of the envelope, breaking the elegant wax seal monogrammed with a stylized VDL. Inside wasn't just a check. It was a letter, several pages long, on the same heavy, scented paper. And paper clipped to the top was a bank draft. My eyes, anxious and desperate, skipped the words and went straight to the figure. It was for the exact amount we needed. Not a penny more, not a penny less. It was a number so precise it felt surgical, calculated to the last dollar. It was enough to cover the exclusive Napa Valley Vineyard estate, the 5-star caterer from San Francisco, the jazz band Eleanor had highly recommended, and the breathtaking designer dress from the exclusive boutique where all her friends shopped. It was freedom from our debt, but it also felt like a collar. "Lucas," I breathed, the air leaving my lungs in a stunned rush. My eyes were wide, staring at the string of zeros that seemed to dance on the page. This is everything. It's the exact number from our spreadsheet." "I told you," he laughed, the sound bursting with relief and victory. He leaped from the couch and pulled me into a crushing hug, spinning me slightly. "My parents are amazing. They just want us to be happy. Now we can have the wedding everyone's expecting. The one we're supposed to have." His words, "everyone's expecting," landed in my stomach like a small, cold stone. I felt a flicker of unease, a dissonance I quickly tried to smother. I was being ungrateful, paranoid. This was a miracle. This was his family, the formidable van der Lindes, welcoming me, a girl from a suburb they'd never heard of, with open arms and impossibly open wallets. "Read the letter," Lucas urged, buzzing with a kinetic energy I hadn't seen in weeks. He paced the small room, already mentally composing the deposit calls he'd make. I unfolded the thick, creamy pages. The first paragraph was a masterpiece of warm, congratulatory prose. It spoke of how thrilled and delighted they were to finally welcome me into the family. How they wanted to ensure we started our lives together on the perfect, right foot, completely unburdened by the vulgar stress of financial worry. It emphasized how a van der Linde wedding was not just a party, but a reflection of the family's legacy, their taste, their standards, their reputation. Then I got to the second page. The tone shifted, seamlessly and chillingly. The warm prose cooled into something precise, measured, and utterly impersonal, like the fine print of a corporate contract. Of course, with such a significant investment in your future happiness and the upholding of our family's standing, we simply must ensure the day is perfect in every conceivable detail. To that end, we've taken the liberty of making a few key arrangements to alleviate the immense planning burden from you, my dear. My eyes, now wary, scanned down the list. They had already placed a non-refundable deposit on the vineyard, not the quaint, family-owned one near my parents we'd loved, but the grand, imposing estate they belonged to. They had secured the date with the caterer, the one they'd used for the last 20 years of their Christmas galas. They had even, and this made my skin prickle, booked a preliminary fitting for me at the designer boutique, the one where Eleanor's personal shopper, Celeste, held sway. A cold, tight knot began to form in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't a gift. It was a hostile takeover. It was a beautifully wrapped box containing the funeral of my own vision for our day. Then I saw it. At the bottom of the second page, separate from the typed text, as if it were a casual afterthought, was a single sentence written in that same elegant, now menacing, cursive. All that we ask in return is your understanding that the guest list must be limited to 150, and we will, of course, need final approval. The words, final approval, seemed to pulse on the page, underlined by the sharp flourish of the pen. I looked up at Lucas, whose face was still a canvas of uncomplicated joy and relief. Final approval on the guest list? I said, my voice quieter, smaller than I intended, already betraying my trepidation. Oh, yeah, Mom mentioned that, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if swatting away a gnat. It's just a formality. You know, to make sure no random plus ones or, like, distant second cousins we haven't seen in years show up and clutter the place. It's about keeping the quality and intimacy of the event high. The quality? The word felt ugly and foreign in my mouth, a term for reviewing produce or furniture, not the people we loved. You know what I mean, he said, still not reading the devastation on my face. He was too high on the relief of solved problems. It's going to be in the society pages. Mom's friends, Dad's business partners, they'll all be there. It has to be curated. You get that, right? The cold knot turned to a solid block of ice. I thought of my list. My chaotic, wonderful, vibrant, and decidedly not society page-worthy list. My Aunt Carla, who would definitely wear something brilliantly sequined, slightly too tight, and entirely inappropriate for a Napa estate. My college roommate, Maya, a fiercely talented but perpetually struggling artist who would probably bring her vegan girlfriend, a wonderful woman who made her own soap and would likely find the entire affair bourgeois. My dad's 3 old army buddies, men with loud laughs and rough hands, who would tell sweary, hilarious stories and absolutely, without a doubt, start a conga line during the band's first slow song. I thought of my family's humble contributions, their excitement about celebrating with everyone who loved us, their joy at the prospect of a big, messy, happy party. This check wasn't just paying for a wedding. It was paying for the gentle, systematic erasure of my world, to be seamlessly replaced with the pristine, polished, tasteful, and utterly impersonal world of the van der Lindes. Lucas, I said slowly, carefully, placing the letter down on the coffee table as if it were radioactive. This doesn't feel right. This list, they want to approve our friends? Our family? Who gets to decide if my loved ones are good enough to attend my own wedding? His smile finally faltered, replaced by a confused frown. Chloe, come on. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. This is what they do. This is how they show love. They're paying for everything. They're giving us our dream wedding. Is it? I asked, standing up, the letter trembling in my hand. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Is this our dream? Or is it the dream they have for the son they want everyone to see? The son who marries the right kind of girl with the right kind of wedding at the right kind of venue, photographed for the right kind of people? He stood up too, his face clouding with confusion and a defensive anger I'd never seen directed at me before. What are you even saying? Of course it's our dream. We wanted to get married at a vineyard. We talked about a vineyard. I shot back, my voice rising to meet his, the tears I'd been holding back finally spilling over. A small, family-owned one near my parents' house where we could have a food truck and a local band and everyone could dance barefoot in the grass. Not this country club spectacle. I gestured wildly at the glossy brochure for the imposing, manicured estate his mother had chosen, a place that demanded heels and silence. So what? This one is better. It's classier. It's what a wedding should be. My parents are offering us a better version of everything, and you're finding a problem with it? His voice was rising, tinged with a frustration that was born from a lifetime of conditioning. It was the frustration of someone who couldn't understand why everyone wouldn't just gratefully fall in line with his parents' impeccable, generous plans. The problem isn't the what, Lucas, it's the how. I cried, the dam breaking completely. They didn't give us a gift. They gave us a transaction. They're buying control. They're buying the right to approve who gets to celebrate with us. They're buying the right to tell me that my Aunt Carla and her sequins aren't quality enough for their fucking curated event. You're being hysterical and completely unfair to my parents, he said coldly, his voice dropping into a register that was terrifyingly calm. They are being unbelievably, overwhelmingly generous. You're creating drama where there is none. And what happens next, Lucas? I pressed, the full, horrifying future unfolding before me like a premonition. The ice in my stomach was spreading. Do they get final approval on the house we buy? The neighborhood we live in? Do they get to curate our friends, vet them for the right jobs and the right pedigrees? What about when we have kids? Do they get to approve the nanny? The preschool? The pediatrician? Where does it end? When do we get to live a life that we approve of? He was silent for a long, crushing moment. He just stared at me, and in that silence, I saw the devastating truth. For him, it didn't end. This was his normal. This was the price of admission to his family's gilded world, a price he had paid his entire life without ever questioning the cost. He saw no issue with it. And he expected, no, he assumed, that I would pay it, too. I looked at him, the man I loved more than anything, with his kind eyes and his easy laugh, the man who brought me coffee in bed and who cried during sad movies, and in that moment, I saw a stranger. I saw a man who would always choose the path of least resistance, the path his parents had paved for him with gold and unbreakable conditions. I looked down at the check in my hand. It was just a piece of paper, but it felt like a contract, a binding agreement I was moments away from signing, selling my autonomy, my family, and my entire future for a beautiful, hollow day. My voice was quiet but steady when I spoke again, the tears drying on my cheeks. I can't accept this. What? He whispered, the word barely audible, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. I can't, I repeated, my strength returning with each word. I can't marry into this. I gestured to the letter, to the invisible but potent cage it represented. I love you, Lucas. I love you so much it physically hurts me to say this. But I don't love this. I won't start our life together by letting your parents buy the right to edit out the people I love. I won't let them pay to make me ashamed of my own family and the life that made me who I am. The following hours were a blur of tears, of raised voices that echoed in our small yellow apartment, of pleading and desperation that went nowhere, and ultimately, of a devastating, suffocating silence. He couldn't understand. He truly, fundamentally could not. In his eyes, I was throwing away our future, our dream, our love, over a silly, insignificant condition about a party list. In my eyes, I was saving us from a future where every holiday, every birthday, every major life decision would come with a price tag and a list of conditions, where our happiness would always be a product of their approval. I left the check on the kitchen counter, a stark white rectangle on the scratched laminate surface. I packed a single bag, my hands moving on autopilot. I called my parents, and through heaving, gut-wrenching sobs, I told them I wasn't getting married. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. Then my mother, without a moment's hesitation, said, "Okay, honey. It's okay. Come home. Aunt Carla is here, and she's making her famous lasagna." As I drove away from the apartment, from the life and the future I thought I was building, I felt a pain so acute and profound I thought it would shatter my ribs. It was a grief so heavy I could barely see the road through my tears. But beneath the crushing weight of the grief, there was something else. Something small, hard, and solid, a core sense of self I hadn't even realized I was on the verge of signing away. It wasn't a dream wedding I was leaving behind. It was a beautifully wrapped, exquisitely decorated trap. And I had just chosen my freedom, my integrity, and my Aunt Carla's glorious, ridiculous sequins over all of it. The days that followed were a numb, hazy dreamscape. There were the well-meaning but confused and intrusive calls from mutual friends, their voices laced with pity and curiosity. There was the terse, formal email from Eleanor van der Linde, expressing her deepest disappointment in my rash decision and coolly inquiring about the return of the voided check. The silence from Lucas was the loudest sound of all, a constant, echoing absence that filled my parents' house. Their home became my sanctuary of comforting, predictable chaos. The fridge was covered in old photos and grocery lists, the couch had a permanent dent from my father, and the door was always open for neighbors. Aunt Carla did indeed make lasagna, and she also made me laugh for the first time in weeks by modeling a truly outrageous, wide-brimmed sequined hat she bought specifically for the wedding that would never be. "Their loss, sweetie," she'd said, crunching me into a hug that smelled of shalimar and garlic. "They don't know what they're missing. Their party would have been boring as hell anyway." A month later, the dust began to settle into a fine, manageable layer of sadness. I was staying in my old childhood bedroom, surrounded by relics of a simpler self, applying for remote design jobs, and trying to figure out what to do with the crumpled-up remains of the life I'd planned. I was heartbroken, yes, a part of me felt carved out and empty, but I wasn't regretful. The clarity of my decision held firm, an anchor in the storm of my emotions. Then, a letter arrived. Not on creamy, expensive paper, but on plain, thick white cardstock. The handwriting was familiar, but softer, less assured and practiced than Eleanor's. It was from Lucas's younger sister, Amelia. "Chloe," it began. "I know I probably shouldn't be writing this, and please don't feel like you need to reply. I just wanted to say, I'm so sorry. And I think you're the bravest person I know." I almost dropped the card. Amelia. The quiet, perpetually anxious art history student who always seemed to be physically shrinking into the background at family events, her clothes a uniform of beige and gray, her voice rarely heard above a murmur. "I heard what happened," she continued. "Mom and Dad are playing the victims, of course, telling everyone how devastated they are by your ingratitude. Lucas is a mess, but he's too proud and too entrenched to ever admit he might be wrong. But when he told me about the final approval clause, I understood. I really, truly did." My hands began to tremble, the paper rustling softly. "They did the same thing to me," she confessed. "For my high school graduation party. They paid for everything, the enormous white tent, the string quartet, the caterer from the club, but I had to submit my guest list for approval. They took a red pen and crossed off 3 of my closest friends from school because their parents weren't connected or from the right circles. I was too weak, too scared to say anything. I just cried in my room for a night and then uninvited my friends with some pathetic, made-up excuse. I've hated myself for it ever since. It's what I always do. I just do what they want. It's easier. It's quieter. But it's like living in a beautiful, empty, silent room. Everything is perfect, and nothing is real. Tears of validation, of shared pain, welled in my eyes and spilled over. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't a hysterical, ungrateful gold digger. Someone else in that perfect, polished family saw the cracks in the foundation. Saw the prison bars behind the gilding. You stood up for yourself, she wrote, and I could almost feel the admiration pouring from the page. You did what I've never, ever had the courage to do. You showed me it's possible. You've inspired me, Chloe. I'm applying for a transfer to a university across the country. I might even study something they don't approve of, like studio art, instead of art history. I just wanted you to know that your no might have given someone else the strength to say yes to themselves. Thank you for that. I'll always wish you'd been my sister-in-law. With love, Amelia. I held the letter to my chest, sobbing, but this time, the tears were different. They were not just tears of loss and heartbreak, but of profound validation and a strange, bittersweet hope. My decision, my painful, isolating choice, had sent ripples through the still, controlled waters of that family, and one of those ripples had reached a girl who was drowning in compliance, giving her a lifeline to a world where she could be herself. It didn't magically fix my broken heart. It didn't bring Lucas back or change the past. But it gave my pain a purpose. It transformed it from a simple wound into a battle scar. I hadn't just walked away from a wedding, I had, in a small, significant way, thrown a stone at a fortress of control, and from within, I'd heard an echo. A crack had appeared. A year later, I was living in a new, vibrant city, working for a small, innovative design firm that valued creativity and passion over connections and pedigrees. I was dating a guy I'd met at a local photography exhibit, a landscape architect with dirt under his fingernails and a laugh that could fill a room. He loved my Aunt Carla's lasagna, thought her sequins were fantastic, and had never once asked about my society page, potential or my net worth. I was scrolling through Instagram one lazy Sunday when I saw a post from a distant mutual friend. It was a picture of Lucas. He was at a charity gala, looking handsome and impeccably dressed in a tuxedo that fit him like a glove. His arm was around a woman I didn't recognize. She was stunning, perfectly coiffed, her smile white and even, wearing a gown of icy blue silk that probably cost more than my first car. She looked like she'd been perfectly, utterly approved. Lucas was smiling too, but it was the same polished, practiced, vacant smile I remembered from countless family dinners and society events. It was a smile that served as a mask, and it didn't reach his eyes. I felt a pang of sadness for him, for the man I'd loved, for the man who was, I knew, still living in that beautiful, empty, silent room his sister had described. He had everything, and I suspected he had nothing at all. But the pang was followed immediately by a deep, unwavering, and solid certainty that settled in my bones. I had made the right choice. The only choice. My life wasn't curated. It wasn't perfect, or sleek, or society page ready. It was messy, gloriously unpredictable, often loud, and entirely, wonderfully my own. It was filled with the unapproved, the uncurated, the beautifully noisy chaos of the people I loved, just as they were. And that was worth infinitely more than a perfect, silent, gilded cage.